This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze, that maze of life. You are special. And my special guest is Justin Brien, and I met Justin through podmatch.com. And I can't say enough about the organization because I wouldn't get to meet people like Justin if it weren't for Podmatch. And what I saw in Justin's bio was something that so many of my clients tell me on the first phone call. I feel hopeless. I'm lost. Is there anything else in life? And you know what? I felt that way too. I was happy in my marriage, happy with my children, loved my family, even loved my job, but the culture around me was killing me. And I felt lost. Is this all there is? So I'm going to ask Justin to take us on his journey and tell us a little bit about the sign that is hanging behind him. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. It says, "Be kind to yourself." Justin, how did you learn to be kind to yourself?
Well, that took many, 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 many years of battling with my mental health, battling with substance misuse. And to be honest, sometimes I can still get pretty hard on myself. I think a lot of people, I'm speaking for myself mostly, that I know we're our own worst critics, right? We're our biggest critics. We have high expectations of ourselves even when we're struggling with our mental health, even when we're going through, bad experiences or maybe some traumas, we just expect ourselves to live at such a high rate, be able to function, our motor skills, our mental health skills, our physical skills, just to be able to always produce, right? And so when we're struggling, we can be super hard on ourselves. And, it took me until I think counseling about a year and a half ago to finally accept myself, right? Accept who I was, accept my past, who's I can accept who I'm becoming. That's not me anymore, but I'm becoming somebody else. But you have to have simple reminders throughout your day if you need to. Not all of us can just wake up and be like, oh, everything's peachy clean. I'm so grateful for the breath I'm taking, the air outside. Some of us really have to work at it, right? And so just subtle reminders of, affirmations can help. Obviously, gratitude can help, but just reminding yourself of, hey, that's where I was. This is where I am. This is where I'm going. I like to do that. But it definitely took a while to be kind to myself and still work on it to this day.
And, I think part of the reason so many of us feel like we're lost and alone is because we keep looking at this bigger picture out there. And social media has made it even more dynamic for us. And we think everybody else is so much happier. Look at them. They just went on a picnic. Oh, they're on a cruise. Oh, they're doing this. What have I done? And in my last corporate job on Friday mornings, a manager would call our team in and she'd go around the room and sometimes she'd ask, "What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book? What's your favorite food?" And I was going through a struggle, which I didn't realize at the time. And they would come to me. I didn't know what my favorite book was, didn't know my favorite movie. My brain just couldn't go there. Favorite meant nothing to me because I was constantly moving to get everything done. And I remember one Friday she pulled me aside afterwards and she said, "Karen, you have to participate." I said, "Well, I am." And my answer is, "I don't know." I said, "That's my call for help." And she looked at me and she said, "I can't help you." Now, no, she couldn't make me happy. She couldn't develop my favorite book, my favorite movie, my favorite food. But she could have seen it for a cry of help and say,
Mhm.
"There's something else going on." It was my 21-year-old son who saw it and said to me, "Mom, snap out of it." And it was like, wow. If you can see it, there's obviously something going on. But it's hard for us to realize it because we want to be like everybody else. So you see your transformation really occurred like in the last year and a half. So you're in the beginning steps of that journey. Do you remember what it was that made you say, I don't want to continue down this path. I need to find a new one?
Well, actually, so I've been sober now for 5 years, going on six.
Right.
And it wasn't until, I still had things to work through, right? When I got sober, I got my family back together. I got a job. I went to school. I started speaking. I started volunteering. And, I was going to the gym. I had my fitness routine, which is very important to me. I was doing my gratitude, but I was busy. I was always busy, right? I was doing whatever I could so I didn't have to go back to my old ways. I was scared to return there. It was a place of darkness I didn't want to go. I lived there for, 16 years in substance misuse with alcohol, 10 years with drugs, and, suicidal for six. I'm very fortunate to be here. I struggled with my mental health and self-worth since I was a kid. So I hit the gate running, and one of the first things in rehab they do is they don't do anything for a year. And wow, do I get that now? But I was that guy. Hey, I'm gonna do what I want still. You can't tell me what to do. Am I glad I got back together with my family, right? My girlfriend had to leave me with my son at one point, and I didn't blame her at the time. I was no shape to have a kid around, but I'm glad I got back together with my family. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard going from being alone to busy, busy, not just in one aspect, but school, family, work, volunteering. I made myself busy, which was a mistake, but I was neglecting my other areas. So I was busy in all these areas. I did counseling for the 6 months after rehab again. I still kept going, and I was feeling pretty good. I went off my medication and I stopped my counseling, and it caught up to me. And then burnout started to hit, and me and my wife, we went through, three personal losses that were pretty heavy. We ended up living in the Ronald McDonald House for the birth of our new daughter, she's doing well. And you neglect yourself, right? You don't do the little things that got you to the place where you are today. You start to push them away. Oh, I'll get to that tomorrow. And finally, I had to reach out, like, hey, I need to see a counselor again. And I kept talking to him, and I kept talking about my past, and he's just like, Justin, what can you do about it? Nothing. Okay. Can you accept that? Yeah. Do you think you're going to become that person again? Well, no. Do you want to be that person? No. Can you accept that? And so it took a while, but finally I had to, realize that, no, I'm not that person anymore. And to, you can't stop the things at work,
Right.
right? We're living in that world where, we're social media, where we look at everybody, we look at all their highlight reels, we see their chapter 10s, we don't see their chapter 2s very often. I think some one thing is you can pick who you follow, right? And so I really limited to who I follow on my Instagram now. I deleted all the big name influencers. I don't, because I'm not there yet. I know that's what they got there. But we're in a different zone right now. So I stopped comparing myself to those guys. We all have different experiences. We all have different ways on how we deal with those experiences that we gone through, but we can get lost in that trap of they have this, I don't have this. They have this, I don't have this. So in order to get that, I got to do what they did. And then you start to neglect. I mean, it's good to do what they did to get there, right? You got to learn. And what they obviously do works. But then you start to neglect some of the things that help you to get where you are.
Right.
And so I started to neglect a lot of those things, but I started to revisit those and, make sure that you talk about what you're going through, because the more you isolate, humans are meant for connection. We were born for connection. Actually, the opposite of addiction is connection, right? And so the more you isolate yourself, the only conversations you're ever going to have are with yourself.
Right.
And who's going to monitor those? Nobody. You are. So all of a sudden you're projecting thoughts into other people and conversations that are happening that never happened, but they're your own thoughts projecting into somebody else's.
It's interesting because when I first started coaching, I remember my first client, and she kept saying, I really should be seeing a mental health official. And I said, okay, do you know why? Because I keep hearing these thoughts in my head. I said, you're not alone. We all do.
Mhm.
Now, you know, mental health is talked about, you know, if you hear voices, oh, that's terrible. But you're not really hearing voices. You're hearing your old experiences. So when you go to do something, maybe it's for the first time in a long time, this voice says to you, oh, the last time you did that, you failed at it. So now you're thinking, oh, I'm a failure. I better not do it. That old self is always going to be there. We
Mhm.
have to learn how to understand what it's saying and not necessarily accept all the thoughts that are going through our heads. It's good that they come up sometimes because it says, hey, alert, you may want to look in a different direction. So, for those of you listening, if you're saying, I'm constantly having these thoughts, I think of them as voices in my head, know that those are your memories. Those are the things that you have done for X amount of years up until today. So I'm sure in your case, Justin, there are times when those thoughts of alcohol, drugs, even though you don't want it anymore, is like, yeah, but do you remember how good this made you feel?
Mhm.
And you have to be strong enough now to say, yeah, but I know how good I feel now without it. And like
Yeah,
you
those
said,
memories
not
they're
easy.
always there. Like I still get using dreams, and those are hard. And then you wake up and you're like, did you use? Right? I'm like, oh, they're 6 years down the drain. So I still get those. I can still get the urges to use, but then my why is strong enough. It's much stronger than my struggle and greater than my want. Like my family is my why. Um, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing, speaking on substance use if I go back to drinking. Right. So that's a big part too. Myself, I don't like that guy. That guy is just, he isolates. He doesn't want to be around people. And I don't want to be that guy. So I have a really good foundation of whys. I like to tell people to find your why, but you can have more than one why. And if you can't, so for me to find my why, I finally looked at my son when we were broken up, but because I was at the point where, I wanted to end my life so my son could have a better dad. And I started preparing. And I finally looked at him and said, okay, well, I started to reframe my thoughts. What if I got better so I could become the dad he needed? If I get better for him, I get better for me. If I get better for me, I can help other people. And a lot of people are going to say in your life, you got to do it for yourself. But if you can't, you got to find your why, grab a hold of it, and take it with you everywhere. And I say this in my speech. And that's because whatever you do it for, it always comes back on you, no matter what. Right. And I know for a lot of guys I went to rehab with, we couldn't do it for ourselves. Right. That's why we went to rehab. We went to learn how to do it for ourselves. But we had to have a why to go there. Right. And so if you find a why and you do it for that why, it comes back on you regardless because I got better for him. I ended up getting better for me. And then finally I could start to see that I was worth it through my own lens, looking in the mirror, not hating the man that I saw back. Right.
And I love how you said that. Initially, your why was for your son.
Mhm.
That why changes. And it still is for your son, but it's for your son because it makes you a better person. Okay. If we were just talking about, well, because it just makes me a better dad, it doesn't encompass the rest of your life. But when it makes you a better person, not only are you a better dad, you're a better husband, you're a better friend, you're a better support system. Because one of the things I find in my podcasts is that people like you energize me. They remind me that, you know what? Yes, Karen, you had a bad day 2 days ago. You were feeling really sorry for yourself. You, you know, let those weird thoughts get into your head. But at the same time, I was fighting those thoughts. Yeah,
Mhm.
I feel worthless right now. Well, why do you feel worthless? Well, because this happened. Okay. And is that really affecting you? Yeah, for the moment. Is it going to affect you tomorrow? And I knew what my answer was right away. No, I'm feeling sorry for myself right now. Okay, let's have a pity party. Let's get it over with and let's move forward. And it's funny because I was here alone in the studio and I was vocally saying all this. And I started laughing, like, Karen, stop talking to yourself. But it was like, no, I need to. It reminds me that I can't be happy and satisfied 24/7 because other things infiltrate your brain.
Yeah, well, and that's where like depression comes in or like a sadness, right? Where, if it's clinical depression is a sadness that persists for longer than 2 weeks at a time. Sadness is, it occurs from an event or an experience or something like that. And I think people can get caught in saying I'm depressed when they go through an experience. But then when you start to say that I am depressed, right? The I am statements, you start to affirm it to yourself and then you hold yourself in that spot. But by questioning that, right? Questioning your thoughts, looking for evidence, looking for a positive outcome, rewriting the statement, stuff like that, you can hopefully get out of that. And I've been caught doing that too. I was naive to believe that when I got sober, my life was, stuff's not going to happen to me. I'm sober, right? Holy cow! I've been tested in the last 5.5 years with personal loss and other things that I've gone through and seen and witnessed and been a part of that, you're just like, how does this keep happening? But, I think it was Inky Johnson saying, why not me? Right? It's not just like you get that guy gets that promotion. Why can't I get it? But it also applies to if you're going through something bad, why isn't something else bad going to happen to you? Right? You're not immune to things happening to you just because you're going through something, right? And you got to be aware of that. And how many times can you get caught and be like, oh, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? It's life. Life does not stop for you. Just because you might be going through depression or something is going happening to you, life's not going to stop for you. And you got to be able to change that mindset because I got stuck in that mindset and I'm like, poor me. Why is this happening to me? It's like, I'm like, why not me? Right? Like, if stuff's happening to me, it usually means at least I'm out trying to do something in a weird way. And that might sound, unfair to some people, but it's you got to be aware that just because you're going through something, life's not stopping. But you got to make sure you work through whatever you're going through.
My youngest son, for many years, when he got triggered by something that upset him, he liked to use the word he was depressed. And he would keep
Mm.
saying it over and over again. And he'd come to me and he'd say, don't talk to me. I'm depressed. I'm going in my room. I'm closing my door. And he started this as a teenager. And I knew as a teenager, no, you're not going to close that door. You can go in your room and be depressed, but the door's going to stay open. And I'm here if you need me. Um, and he would talk himself into depression. I didn't understand that you could do that until I met with a mental health advisor and they said, absolutely. He was upset about something, but in his mind, he just kept growing it and growing it and growing it. And yeah, he got depressed. His thoughts started wandering way further than they should. And he said, but the fact that he then catches himself, which he would. So for 24 hours, this was his MO. And then all of a sudden, he'd do one little thing different. And then all of a sudden, he was a happy guy. And if you even brought up the situation, he downplayed it. And so I had to get to understand that that was part of his personality. However, since he moved away, has a good job, and is living on his own, those things still happen, but they're in shorter time frames because he knows. Now he can look back and go, hey, I got through it the last time. I can get through it again. He hasn't done it alone. He's been in therapy. Okay. He uses me as a sounding board. Um, and I've learned no judgment. Just let it keep flying. And when he was younger, I was judgmental. I was mom.
Hmm.
Those of you out there, don't judge. You don't know what is really going on. Sometimes you just have to talk it out. So, what got you to that point? You didn't just wake up at 6 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, and decide, I'm going to start drinking. What was the catalyst for you?
Well, in high school, I had low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-confidence. I was an athlete, but I was always behind my friends in hockey. I was smaller. And I attached a lot of my self-worth to sports. And I started, acting out, trying to be the funny man, seeking validation, trying to get people to like me. But I was making fun of myself a lot, right? Yeah, because I'd get other people to laugh. And if they laugh at me, then right? I mean, they're paying attention to me. They're filling up my bucket in a weird sort of way. And when I moved away, I actually moved away to play junior hockey. I found alcohol. I mean, I started drinking, but I remember sitting down in the basement one time with my billet family or my friend's billet family, and I drank a beer. I'm like, I really want another one. And I remember waiting for him to finish his, and then I had another one. I had another one. And I'm like, ooh, I really like this. And I found what alcohol gave me was that self-esteem, self-worth, and self-confidence. And so I went from basically not drinking to an alcoholic within a couple of years, or within maybe even a year. Like I drank a handful of times in high school, but I didn't drink that summer to move away for hockey. And then I found it. And I found it made me a different person. I thought I was a cooler person. Well, people probably would have said you're more of a mess. But that's what started me off on drinking. And then when I moved to Vancouver, I became a bartender, Vancouver, BC, in the west coast of Canada. Um, I found drugs. And I found that alcohol made me confident, drugs made me funny. So I got the special juice that I made a concoction for, and I used that until 28 when I finally asked for help. But when I asked for help at 28, I ended up becoming suicidal for 6 years. And, it took me 6 years of actively trying to help, being suicidal, to finally sitting downstairs. I was looking at photos. I was living in my mom's basement suite at the time, and I had no job. Right? I had no money. I had child support coming up. And I looked at photos of my son and I, and his toys in the corner, and I'm like, his hockey stick on the ground. I'm like, Justin, you got two choices, man. Like, you either continue to go down this path, your son's going to grow up without his biological father, or ask for help. And so on that day, January 4th, 2019, I phoned my mom and I said, hey, can you take me to the hospital? And on that day, with my mom in front of me, my dad to my left, and my counselor to my right, I actually admitted out loud that, if I continue to feel like this, I don't want to be here anymore. And I won't be here anymore. And, just saying that in front of them, it took a world of weight off my shoulders, and just, it felt relief. I felt relief, felt scared, felt safe at the same time. But when you live behind a mask for so long, you don't even know who you are anymore. And to be able to tell the truth, it almost sets you free a little bit. I mean, it didn't get rid of all my feelings, that's for sure. But for them to know was it was good for them to know.
And I think your journey there is so important because some people get that wake up call like you did, but think, I can take care of it myself. I'm going to. And there's a fraction of people that do, but typically you need to surrender yourself to get the help that is out there. Because in the real world, there's a beer in almost every refrigerator. There's always somebody who has some form of drugs. And now that some of those drugs are more legal, they're even more available, um, which I think is it's a two-edged sword as far as I'm concerned. I was uh, at an event not too long ago, and I wasn't really physically feeling well, but it came across as I wasn't mentally there either. And a friend of mine, who I didn't expect, said, "Come on out to my car. I've got some gummies." And I knew what she was talking about. And I said, "You know what? I'm not going to go that road. Yeah, I'm not feeling good. I don't know if it's physical or mental right now." I said, "I think the best thing for me to do is just to go home." For days, I got the phone call. "I'll come over with them. This is what you need." Maybe I did. Maybe I needed one. Maybe I needed two. But I knew it was something that I could correct at that point.
Hmm.
And I've been able to talk it out through my coaches as well. You know, I was sort of interested, but I didn't want to be interested. And so I knew that I had to work through it. You knew that it wasn't going to be easy to stop your concoctions. You wanted to live, but you didn't want to live the way you were living at the moment.
Hmm.
Can you tell
Well,
us what rehab is really like?
rehab, yeah. Well, first I want to just play off your story there for a second. It's crazy. And make sure I say it in my speech. If somebody says no to you, leave it at that, and it's none of your business as to why. It's none of your business. You leave it alone. And it's funny how the world, when you say no to that, like alcohol, I play sports. It was at golf, it was at baseball, it's at hockey, it's in the dressing room, it's at, you go for dinner, you go to a house party, you go to a friend, a family event. It's just, it's on TV, it's everywhere, right? And it's the only drug in the world. You have to explain why you don't use it. Oh, you don't drink? Oh, you got a problem. You're the weird one.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, oh, you want this for your gummy? So do you want to mask it or do you want to deal with it? And I realized actually not too long ago that, the gym has been a really good antidepressant for me. But here's the thing about the gym. You get all these people, oh, the gym makes my mental health better. Okay, it might help with your endorphins and those chemicals you have in your body, but it ain't gonna help you with the voices in your head. It ain't gonna help you with the traumas you've gone through. And people got to realize that. Yeah, okay, you might take gummies and they might help you a bit. But is it going to help you go through those voices and the traumas that you're actually experiencing, the real life experiences, right? So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And it was something I had to come to the realization that, because I guess a gym junkie, I guess you could say. I go like 5 times a week. It's important for me, but I like to listen to podcasts, books sometimes. Um, but what is rehab like? Well, rehab for me was different because I was no longer the black sheep in life. I was, growing up, I got good grades in school, and I was athletic and people liked me, and I had a family that loved me, but I went through some stuff as a kid that you shouldn't have to go through. But when I got to rehab, everybody was messed up, right? You had problems, but we had to talk about those problems, right? So you knew everybody's secrets and you could just see men being vulnerable. And that's the one thing that, helped me a lot was, getting rid of that man up stigma and talking about what you're going through. Because in rehab, you talk about what you're going through. You talk about the stuff and you learn about some of the stuff that those guys have gone through, had done to them. And, it's tough to hear. My first time in rehab, I went to a center that was full of 60 men. One guy overdosed. One guy left and he ended up passing away on the streets. You see different kind of walks of life. Men are there to be because they're mandated from court. Instead of going to
Right.
jail, they can go to rehab. Some guys are blue collar workers. You see a variety, and it can be hard because you are essentially putting 60 guys in a house, 3-story house, taking away their coping mechanisms and say, talk about your feelings. It's like, okay. There was anger points, there were trigger points, there were men at each other's necks, no physical violence, fortunately enough. But when I got out of there, yeah, I ate well, right? That's the one thing is, some of these people that go to rehab, they don't eat very well. And, they might be out on the streets. So everyone's fed well. So that's a good thing about rehab. But that also makes you get uncomfortable, which is also a good thing. The second time I went to rehab, it was with 20 guys in a smaller setting, but you go through guilt and shame and vulnerability and mindfulness. But the third week, which was anger, holy mo, I didn't think I was going to make it. You got guys yelling at each other. You're revisiting all those emotions, all those things that you've gone through, and you haven't learned to deal with them yet. So temperatures ran high, temperatures ran hot, and we made it through. But I think one of the best parts of rehab that I learned was the power of acceptance and forgiveness, and how it's actually for us. How there are going to be things in your life that happen to you. You're going to have a bad experience. You may go through a trauma. You may lose a loved one. Um, you may not be able to save somebody that you think you could have, or help someone that you think you could have. And someone might hurt you. First thing you have to do is accept it. And you learn. I learned that about in life coaching too. Accept that it really happened. Now that doesn't mean you have to like it, but you have to accept it, and you accept it so that you can move on. And here's the cool thing I learned about forgiveness: is if somebody hurts you, you don't have to forgive them to their face, but you have to forgive them for you, so you can move on and stop living in
Right.
your past and create the future. You can cut that person out, but you got to go through the process of actually forgiving them. I remember one time we had a group, because we all did counseling in a group, right? And then you could do one-on-one counseling as well,
Sure.
but they're always group sessions. But he turned off the lights, we turned our chairs around, closed our eyes, and he led us through this forgiveness kind of routine. And I just remember crying, and it was powerful. And then realizing that, that person probably didn't mean to hurt me. That some people's actions is, maybe they're coming from a place of hurt. Maybe that's all they know. It's not giving them an excuse or anything. But what did they go through to bring them to that? And that really helped me, was recognizing the power of acceptance and forgiveness. And then finally realizing it, what was it? I guess a year and a half later, that, hey, you know what? I have to go through that process for myself.
So tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, how you are helping yourself as you're helping other people.
So for me, getting back into gratitude is a big one. Back into journaling is good. Reminding myself throughout the day of the good things I have in life. Slowing down. I have ADHD. I was diagnosed with clinical depression, anxiety, and ADHD. And with ADHD, my mind races. And people don't realize, why am I so tired? And only your mind is moving a million miles a minute. So I want to get into meditating. And I know it's always been hard for me, but my coach was like, Justin, just do it. Sit there 30 seconds if you can. I don't know if you have ADHD, but if you ever try to listen to a song, I'm going to listen to this whole song. And then 12 seconds later, you're like, oh man, I got to start that song again. But I want to try to get into meditating, but keeping my fitness routine up, keeping my journaling, my gratitude up, slowing down my mind. I've been doing a really good job of that lately, of when my mind starts to race, being mindful of the situation, mindfulness, practicing mindfulness, being aware of the situation I'm in, trying to focus on the current moment that I'm going through. Um, really questioning my thoughts, if they're real. Is there evidence surrounding them? How would I feel if I didn't have that thought? Or what can I do about it? So that's kind of my routine now. Coaching my son in hockey is, that helps me a lot, except for he's the hardest one to coach, because why would I listen to dad?
Yeah. I know how difficult it is with kids because my son, when he played soccer, he asked my husband to be a coach. Now, my husband is not athletic at all, but he's good at relating to kids. And so he was the soccer coach. And there were many times that my son would go pouting, Dad won't let me play goalie. Well, you know what? So and so is better fit for goalie than you are. You know, so I know coaching our kids is not easy. Um, but in the long run, they do appreciate it as they get older that, hey, dad participated, dad was there for me. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm sure your son at some point is going to realize that you got healthy and now you can be part of his life. And for those of you who are out there saying you're feeling so lonely that nobody wants to be around you, there's things we all can do. And I think it does start with a deep dive into ourselves. And if you need additional assistance, it's out there. Okay. Whether you need medical, psychological coaching. And there's a lot of us out there who are coaching. And those of us who coach, we've had these experiences. And I think that's what makes coaching so powerful. I'm sure, Justin, when you are out there coaching someone and they go, God, he went through this, he got through it. I may not do it the exact same way Justin did, but I'm going to listen to his story. I'm going to let him guide me and I'm going to find my path. And then there's going to be others who we both know. They're not going to hear anything that we're helping them with, and they're going to continue to be the way they are. And that's a personal choice. You could have had the personal choice not to get healthy, but you made the personal choice, and it will be a choice that you'll have to work on till the day
Mhm.
you die. So
Yeah, sobriety is it's a lifelong job almost recovery, and you got to work at it every day because you know one thing could set you off and you go back, one drink turns to two, two to three, three to blacking out, and all of a sudden you're in that vicious cycle again. So recovery is a lifelong thing for me, and I've accepted that, and I'm gonna make sure I stick to the things that I learned and try to learn more along the way, but being easy on myself
so
on that.
how can my listeners find you and follow you and get some coaching if that's what they're looking for?
Well, I have a website, justinbrien.com. That's JUSTINBRIEN.com. You can find me on Instagram, justinbrien19, or TikTok, which I'm not very active on. Yeah, Justin Inspiration. And I'm on LinkedIn as well.
So we'll put all those links in the show notes. And again, I want to thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, and I want to congratulate you on your years of getting healthy and sober and enjoying your children. That's what life is all about.
Yes, it is. Oh, yeah. And if you feel like reading, I do have a book out there called Chasing Shadows, Fighting the Monster Within that got a bestseller on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon, Kindle, ebook, Barnes and Noble, chapters. You can get it basically anywhere if you feel like reading. It's a book on my life, goes deeper into my story, but it also is separated into three parts: life during alcohol, life after alcohol, and then learning lessons. And there's questions in there that you can ask yourself, and maybe helps you find what's underneath the rock. Sometimes we think this is the problem, but actually it's something else. So
We'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. I think everybody who is dealing with some sort of mental, physical abuse to their bodies, and that can be through drink, it can be through food, it can be through just being on the go 24/7. Sometimes we just need that little bit of help. So thank you so very much. We'll talk to you soon. Bye bye now.
thanks for having me.